Welcome to the CFO Show. I'm your host, Melissa Howatson, CFO of Venice Solutions.
And I'm Tom Siegmiller, VP of FP&A at Venice Solutions. Melissa, today we've got an episode called The Lost Art of ROI, or Return on Investment. Given the theme and the environment we're in today, how important is this topic from your perspective?
I think it's super timely, Tom. When I think about some of the focus on efficiency, productivity, more minding of the bottom line, figuring out which of those investments you're making that are actually going to have a real solid payback and when, it's such a key part of our decision making and the trade-offs that we're thinking about making within our business. And I think that sometimes this topic it feels so hard, and I sometimes wonder if it's not us in finance that are actually making it appear that way and overly complicating it. I would love for our guest today to be the one to really add context to this conversation. Let's bring in Ian Campbell, CEO of Nucleus Research and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the book, The Value Sale. Ian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Melissa, thank you very much for inviting me on the CFO Show.
Ian, maybe we can kick off by having you tell us a little bit more about yourself and Nucleus Research.
So Nucleus Research is a research firm, like a lot of the others in following the tech industry. So we look at people who sell technology and people who consume and buy technology. But we have a particular view. We look at value. Does something deliver value or not? And I like to say, we don't like or dislike any bit of technology. We hate all of it equally. What we really look for is, does it deliver value or not? As technology delivers value, it delivers value for the customer. So it's sort of a joke that we hate all of it. We actually like technology, but we're really looking at how does it deliver value for the customer? That's the key question that we answer.
So Ian, do you think that the ability to look at return on investment and knowing how to do that, has it been lost along the way? And if so, what do you think in markets has driven that?
Yeah, so ROI is a topic that a lot of people talk about, but not a lot of people really implement on a regular basis. And I think, over the last maybe 5 years or so, a lot of technology has been purchased based on what's at the top of some list, or what does somebody else have, or who gets the most marketing visibility. And really, I think today and going forward, there's a greater emphasis on, does it make sense for the company? And I think there are two things really driving that question. First, decision makers are really faced with not unlimited budgets. So what's the best project for me to do for my organization is really an ROI question. What's going to deliver the greatest value? And that's from the sort of CFO decision maker side. But that champion who's saying we should do something, we should implement a new bit of technology, you're really asking that champion to put their neck out a little bit and say, we need to buy something. And it's easier for those champions to put their neck on the line, if you will, if they know that the decision they're making is going to deliver an ROI or a payback period in a certain amount of time. Today, making a decision based on this will cover its cost in 6 months is a lot easier than making a decision based on some firm said it was the top of some quadrant or some list. So really that pragmatic view of, is this going to deliver value, is what we're seeing a lot of people turn to.
And I totally agree, Ian, and I think that a couple years ago, it was a lot more of a growth at all cost mindset, and we've certainly seen in markets the shift towards focusing on growth still as businesses, but also minding that bottom line more. And I totally agree with you. I think that's where what you said, when will this be paid back? What's it going to do for the business? How do I make sure that I'm not going to lose my job by making this decision? It really comes into sharp focus in this environment.
And that's exactly it. CFOs know that in strong times when there's a lot of growth, it is growth at all costs. But when things start to taper off, it's really about managing the bottom line. So when you spend money, you need to be sure that you're getting back more than you're spending, or you're not going to be able to do that very long because you have competition. And if the competition is doing a better job than you are at cutting costs or at investing wisely, it's going to be pretty tough for you to stay in business.
Really couldn't be a more timely conversation. My concern really is that we might have a whole generation of folks that don't understand the art of ROI, or they look to spend and not ultimately get that return on investment. And so really hoping we can dig in. You help sales teams to understand the art of ROI, return on investment, and help teach them to articulate value. Are there some basics that you always start with in working with sales teams?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we've worked with thousands of sales reps over the years. And Nucleus has been around for 23 years, and we've been teaching sales reps really since the first day about return on investment. The first example I always use, and it's in the book, in the Value Sale book, is if I told you you could make money raising baby alligators in your bathtub, would you do it? And I get the same reaction from your sales rep. You see it in the audience. They first laugh, and then they say no, and then they say, wait a minute, how much money am I going to make? And I say, okay, what if I could tell you you would make $5 million a year raising baby alligators in your bathtub? Well, odds are pretty good you do it. And so there's a number above which you're buying baby alligators, and there's a probably slightly higher number above which your spouse thinks that you're a genius for raising baby alligators in your bathtub. Even though it's the only bathroom you have and you have to go down the street, there is a number above which that's okay, and you'll probably try to do it 2 or 3 times. And the point really of that example, as absurd as it really is that if you're a salesperson selling and you've had a deal close, probably because of value. Because I just sold you baby alligators without telling you any of the features of the baby alligators. I didn't tell you they're fun to play with. I didn't tell you they made better watch dogs than a dog. I didn't tell you anything about the product itself. The only thing I did was prove value, and you bought. And that's really the point. If I can make a value message out of whatever the message is that I'm trying to get across to the customer, I'm going to sell every day. And an important next step to that conversation is to point out there's only 3 things I can do for a customer. I can either increase productivity, reduce cost, or as a byproduct of those 2, increase profitability. And if I know that those are the 3 things I can do, as I'm talking to that customer, I can start to weave that value message into the top of the sales funnel, into the beginning of the discussion, then try to put ROI at the very end and say, oh, I've got to do a business case. Let me try to do that at the end of the deal. So the big key takeaway for the sales reps today is first, ROI is easy and it helps you sell. And second, start it early in the conversation, not toward the end of the conversation.
Ian, any particular reason why sales teams haven't led with value for years and years? Like, why is this not happening in market, just for the sake of us, our understanding?
Yeah, it's funny about ROI. I think, ROI has this maybe mystique about it that it's somehow difficult. And, I like to say that, I like to point out, you all already know ROI. If you've walked into any bank and put money in a savings account and you're getting a return, you already know what the ROI equation is. I give them $100, they give me back $5 a year, and I still have that $100. Well, that's a 5% ROI. You know the equation. But for some reason, salespeople say, well, there's hard and soft benefits, and what do I do? And you sort of make more into it. And then, you have rapid sort of value engineering teams that will go in and try to do a big project out of building a business case. And sometimes that's necessary. But most of the time, this is a lot easier than it seems if you break it down to its simplest components. So I think ROI has this belief that it's difficult. And I think most salespeople will say, well, maybe I just won't talk about it till I actually have to. And what you're really doing is hurting yourself, because if you ignore that conversation, by the time you get to the point that you have to bring it up, you're already pretty far along in the sale, and you've probably delayed your sale, or worse, you may have killed your sale. If you start at the beginning and start talking about value early on, it's a lot easier to then close the deal at the end.
And so, Ian, you talk about that mystique around ROI, and I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes it generates this fear in people of, that sounds hard and complicated and I don't get it. And so when I think about the other side of the house, we've got the finance organization within the business. What do you think is the role of that finance organization in terms of helping to educate and mobilize this understanding of ROI within the business?
So, I think we've got finance folks on 2 sides. We've got them on the vendor side to help articulate that message out to customers, and then we've got it on the end user, the consumer side, in helping to understand whether something's a good decision or not. On the vendor side, I think finance has a really good idea of how they would buy, and weaving those messages into marketing is what finance can best do. And it's a really strong role for finance. Finance knows value very well. And marketing teams that are trying to build a marketing message, you've got a great resource in your finance department that you could say, hey, here's the marketing message we're trying to get to our customers. If you were buying from us, how would you receive that message? I'll give you a little tip. You guys are finance folks, so I could tell you ROI. So I could say the ROI from a project is 200%. But finance people really respond better to payback. If I told you that the project covers its cost in 6 months, you feel that, you know what that is. So as a marketing person, sometimes leading with payback, and as a salesperson, sometimes leading with payback, will smooth the way for your customer who's trying to buy a product. And on the consumer side, if you're an end user looking to buy a product, finance needs to take a look and say, how can I simplify this business case effort to say, what are the 2 or 3 things that really matter to our company, and how is this project that you're promoting going to deliver value? Not all of the benefits, but the top 2 or 3. And one of the things we see, we've published 1,000, almost 2,000 ROI case studies by now. And in that collection of case studies, I've never seen more than 5 benefits. There are usually 1 or 2 benefits that drive a deal and 2 or 3 benefits that support a deal. So when you look at a big company trying to buy technology, the biggest mistake they make is, let's make the business case into some long report. What it really should be is no more than a few pages. Benefit 1, benefit 2, what are the costs, what's the ROI, what's the payback, is really all you need to get across. So on the vendor side, your CFO is one of your best resources in sitting with marketing saying, how's our message? On the end user side, the CFO should be the evangelist that says, let's simplify this and make it easier for people to buy.
And I love how you state that, because when I think about, especially in the current climate, it's sometimes perceived that it's the CFO or the finance org or even the board that's actually standing in the way and not letting the deal go through. And yet we're all looking at limited resources, trying to make those decisions about which ones get funded and which ones don't. And it makes it quite easy if you hear, hey, the payback on this is 6 months, and someone else is saying, hey, this payback is 3 years. It becomes quite easy which one is the riskier investment or not. And you do tend to, it's just easier to be funding those ones that are going to have quicker payback, because then other money can be going into other things along the way when you've got those quicker paybacks. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and I think, one of the challenges for a CFO, for the finance folks, is they've always been perceived as no people. And I think the challenge really for the vendors selling products and for people looking to buy is help them to be yes people by simplifying the message to something they want to be. CFOs do not want to be no people. They want to be yes people. But they're no people because the stuff they're getting is usually just convoluted. What a CFO wants to know is, what's the payback? How long is it going to cost till I cover my cost? And what's the ROI? Because there's 2 steps here. Why am I choosing this particular product of all the products I could? And then why am I choosing this project given all the projects I could do in an organization and my limited budget? There's not unlimited budgets. The CFO doesn't sit there and print out money on their printer. It doesn't happen that way. All they have is a limited budget, and they have to figure out where to give money. And I'd say in the old days, meaning before last year, a lot of money was just allocated based on who shouted the most, who made the most, who pled their case. I want to plead my case. Stop pleading your case and start making your case, and you'll find the CFO becomes more of a yes person than a no person.
Yeah, Tom and I sometimes joke about that magical money tree in finance that we keep looking for because others seem to think we have one. So we're still working on that.
Yeah, that doesn't exist, does it? Don't go for the magical money tree. If you're trying to get your project to go through, go for the real money that's already there. Let somebody else try to get the magic out of the rest of the money.
Now, Ian, what do people struggle with most in conveying ROI and payback then? Is it that simplification and distilling it down? Like, why is it such a tough topic to convey for most?
Yeah, it really is. I say sometimes that it's like flying an airplane. I hate to say it, but flying an airplane is actually very simple. You think it's complicated. There's a lot of complicated parts about landing and everything else, but actually the physical act of flying an airplane isn't overly difficult, but people perceive it as being overly difficult. One of the things that we point out for salespeople is think about the sales funnel that you already know. So you already have that sales funnel. You know what those stages are: qualify a lead, align a proposition, eventually bring it to a close. So however many stages you have in the funnel that you face as an organization. Think about that funnel as having 2 sides. I've got the side I already know, those stages in the funnel, and I know not to go to one stage unless I've already completed the stage before. So I know how to drive a customer through the funnel. But now think of the funnel as having 2 sides, kind of the left side and the right side. And the other side is the finance side. And on the finance side, you have 3 steps. The top step is show all the different ways you deliver value. So when you talk to a customer, say, the first conversation, you say, here are all the different ways that we deliver value for customers like you. Then, stage two, that middle stage, as you're getting closer in the funnel, that midpoint, you say, here are other companies like you. Here's another pharmaceutical, or here's another manufacturing company like you that's achieved value with our product, whatever it is. And then at the third stage, you say, here's how you will deliver value. So think about those three stages. How do you deliver value? How have others like you achieve value? How will they achieve value? And if you break it down to that, sort of think of it as three separate stages, it becomes a lot easier to say, okay, this isn't bad. I know all the different ways I've delivered value for customers because I talk to them, I've sold to them. I can ask them right now, I have reference customers, how are you getting value out of my product? Then I can say, oh, I've got another manufacturing customer just like the prospect I'm talking to. Let me have that manufacturing customer talk to my prospect. And then I can talk to my customer and say, my prospect and say, what are the two benefits you're likely to get? How do we quantify those? And then how do we look at the cost and see if you're going to get a positive ROI? So don't think of ROI as, I'm at a stage, I've got to do something. Think of it as a conversation I've woven throughout the discussion. It's going to make it a lot easier for you as a salesperson.
And you talked a bit earlier about some of the insights that finance can share back with marketing, how we buy things from our own vendors, for instance, or running some of the marketing materials past finance organizations. Do you have some other ideas on how finance can be better, more effective business partners with sales and marketing, both as we help to arm them with ROI and how to position, and also maybe some blind spots that we as finance people may have in things we should know in terms of how to best work with them?
Yeah, so certainly finance is the best equipped to be pragmatic about what is the value of their own product. You know the product very well, you work in the company, so you're probably already positively inclined to buy. So, it's the number one thing is really marketing start to sit down with finance and say, here are the materials, here are the messages, how does it resonate to you as a financial decision maker, how can it come in? Marketing needs to spend time with sales, but I wouldn't say that it's not a good thing for finance to spend some time with sales. How is sales approaching that business case? When a salesperson says, gee, I've got to build a business case, what do I do? They can also turn to finance and say, how should I approach it? Or how do you think my prospect is approaching this problem? So you're into a big company, you're trying to sell a product. The best way to understand the challenges your prospect faces is maybe to talk to your own finance person and say, what would you be concerned about given this message that I'm delivering to my prospect? So finance is almost the perfect organization to help you crystallize that value message. Is it worth it or not? So if finance people can spend a little bit of time in a sales call, that wouldn't be a bad thing. It could be pretty valuable to help the salespeople say, oh, this isn't that bad. And we have a safety net in our own finance department that could step in and potentially help us if we get stuck building a business case. I think maybe the last thing you should do as a salesperson is go off and build a big business case without including finance or without including the marketing person as part of it and hope that somehow this business case works. It's never going to.
On top of all your recommendations, Ian, I thought there was some secret sauce in there, and that's getting finance on calls with customers. I think it's often so easy for us to, do it from our castle from afar, looking down. But getting into the weeds, understanding what a customer is experiencing, hearing what's important to them, what's valuable to them, sometimes way more important than just hearing it secondhand from our sales team.
Yeah, an example I always use with sales reps is you may tell me that you sell a screwdriver, but if all of your customers are using it to open paint cans, then you sell a paint can opener. And it doesn't matter what you think you sell, but until you get in front of the customer and understand how they're actually using it, you have no idea what you actually sell, because you need to understand how the customer is receiving that. So the more you can get in front of the customer and understand, how am I using it? How am I achieving value from this? How can we then retune our message to make sure we're talking to those value points? And finance folks are perfectly adapted for that because they have the background in finance, they have the pragmatic view. They're more likely to say, yeah, this is a benefit and this isn't a benefit. Why are we talking about something that's so ridiculous when we have all these other benefits? And we talk about it, I talk about it in the book, but often people say, well, there are hard and soft benefits. And that's sort of the kiss of death for a sale. It's talk about benefits as direct and indirect. If you talk about benefits as soft benefits, finance people usually cringe and say, I'm not sure I want to include those. If you talk about them as direct and indirect, they start to feel better. But in fact, there are actually 4 types of benefits. So understanding that benefits range from really believable, like I'm going to cut a cost, to very much not believable, which is, oh, we're going to deploy this new CRM system and that'll make our sales reps happier, and if they're happier, there'll be lower turnover. Well, a finance person is the first person to tell you that, yeah, I'm not going to count that at all, but I am going to count cutting your cost. Now, you as a salesperson could say, but we had all these customers that mentioned it. But from a finance point of view, it doesn't matter. So that clarity in the way they look at benefits will let you reorganize those benefits and say some benefits, while they may exist, aren't as strong for the business case as other benefits that are very strong. And when it comes to getting budget money, the stronger the benefit, the better off you are.
So at this point in the market, Ian, is there hope for us? Is the lost art of ROI or payback making a comeback? And if it is, just based on some of your anecdotal experience, what should we expect to see in terms of change in close rates for sales teams? Like how much should we be latching onto this as a finance org and helping the rest of our organization to be successful?
Yeah, I think finance can do a fantastic job of really just spend a couple of days and read your own marketing material and say, do I cringe when I read it? Does this resonate with me as a skeptic as opposed to as an evangelist? And then coming back to marketing with, here's how I might retune some of this. It's finance would be the first one to look at the classic marketing features and benefits list and say, these really aren't benefits, these are just features restated. Or you're leading with something that isn't believable, like a change in employee turnover as opposed to a reduction in cost. So how can we look at our marketing material in a more pragmatic way? But I think, certainly we're seeing it in all the clients that we work with. Everybody has moved from pleading their case to making their case. We're seeing a lot of folks using ROI tools, using ROI case studies to make a business case for why they should buy a product. The companies that do that successfully and quickly are going to be the ones that really thrive in a tough economy. The companies that don't or stick with their old message in some way, they're the ones that are going to struggle, because I can't walk in and say, please buy my product anymore. What I have to do is walk in and say, here's why my product will deliver value for you. And a very crisp message that has payback and ROI in it is what's going to help you close. Really what you want to do is take that funnel that used to be wide and you want to bring it into a pipe. The more I can take each one of my leads and turn that into a closed deal, the better off I'm going to be.
So if we actually wanted to clarify a payback on this methodology that we're talking about here today, how would we do it? What sort of examples would you provide with organizations you've worked with?
So we've gone back, because we've trained so many sales reps and we've been in business for so long. We've gone back and looked at how do things sort of change the discussion. If I use ROI or I use TCO, what happens in the sale or what had happened? What we see is you can reduce your sales time by up to a third if you start with value at the beginning of the conversation. I think we have to use an exact number, but that's 32-point-something%. But let's call it a third, is how you're going to reduce your time to a close. If I start with a value message early on, I'm going to reduce my time to a close by a third. Here's another real interesting tip. A lot of people talk about TCO, and I'm going to warn you, probably stay away from TCO. TCO is one of those topics where once I start talking about cost, I bring up the idea of discounting. So if I say the TCO from our product is only $500,000 a year, the customer knows, oh, I could get $400,000 a year if you knock the price off by another 100. So every time somebody says TCO, they increase the odds that I'm going to have that back and forth. But when they talk about value, it's hard to say, gee, I need a steeper discount if I already know I'm getting a 3-month payback and a 400% ROI. So the more you lead with value, the higher your potential average sale, but also the reduction in close. And what really is, I think, going on in the background is, we all know that we're selling to a prospect, somebody who's an evangelist, but that evangelist has to turn around and ask for money from someone else. So when I start a conversation by saying, we sell a CRM system, and that's going to do a lot for you, but the number one thing we think it's going to do for you is increase your sales productivity by at least 10%, in whichever way we calculate that 10%. But what I know is that evangelist, when they're then shopping that message around internally, they're leading with that number. So they start all of their conversations with, the reason we're going with the new CRM system is to increase our sales productivity by 10%. So it's not just you, but it's everybody, your prospect, your evangelist, but it's everybody they're talking to that starts to think value. And that's what shortens the deal, because then when they come back and ask for money, you've already set up the conversation around value. So the shortening the deal really is because you started at the beginning and that message permeated everywhere else when that person was starting to build a consensus, and that helped you shorten that deal. So look for roughly a third, 20% to a third is a pretty good number for time to start the conversation to time to close, how much you're going to save in that time frame.
Wow, a third is pretty compelling in terms of when I think about the impact that has on ability to grow a business. So,
and the funny thing is, it as a CFO. If I walked into your office and said, I'm going to cut costs by 10%, you probably wouldn't even ask me what I'm going to do. You'd probably say yes. You would just say, I don't want to know anymore. That's fine. How much money do you need? And you won't even say, you will not have it. You don't care how I'm going to do that. And that's really it. It's sort of interesting, but it's really true from a decision maker point of view. As long as I can make the business case, you probably don't care what I'm doing.
Ian, I'm going to ask you if you have 5 other instances where you can save 10% too.
Yeah, I'm not sure there are. It's a lot of, that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to say, please do it again and again. It's like the alligator. You would rent as many apartment buildings as you can and fill them with alligators if you thought you were going to make money. In fact, you'd probably, if I went to you and gave you that pitch, you would fire everybody in the company and fill all the offices with alligators because you'd probably make more money.
well, sort of along those same lines, what about groups outside of sales and marketing? Because I think there are great opportunities to apply some of this thinking beyond sales and marketing. Would love your thoughts there, say as we think about engineering or even the human resources team, just other places where this could be applied and we could take away this mystery that's around ROI for those groups.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's product development that's the other group that could really get a lot of value. So think about those product development folks that are looking at what's the next version and the version after. Having one of your own finance people sit in that discussion saying, what are the features we're thinking of adding? Do these features increase productivity or reduce costs? How can we add features that will add more value to the customer as opposed to just more features? If you come out with the next rev of your product and all it is a bunch of new features without some reason for somebody to say, oh, I see why it's reducing my cost, or I see how they're continuing to increase productivity, then why are they buying a subscription service to you every year? So you're not making a compelling message for them to be able to internally say, this is why we're doing this every year, this is why we're paying for this product. So product development really could gain a lot from having your own finance people sit down and say, how does what we're doing feel to you as somebody that might be on the other side of this buying it? And that would be the third group that can really get a lot of value out of including finance as part of the development process.
Excellent advice. Ian, thank you so much for this discussion today. I've really appreciated your insights and really enjoyed reading your book as well. Whenever we have a guest on the show, we do have some rapid fire questions for them. And so are you ready?
Sure, absolutely. Fire ahead.
All right. What has been the best piece of business or leadership advice that you've ever received?
Remain optimistic, that always continue to push ahead and continue to remain optimistic every day.
Optimism, that's great advice. And what about a book that you've read that has been most impactful?
So, any kind of business law book, it's around sort of understanding the different contracts and the things that you do day to day as a CEO. There's a lot of HR issues that you sort of know and a lot of other things, but understanding just, what I can do and what latitude I have has been pretty good, and it's certainly one of the more valuable books I've read.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, Ian. Really appreciated having you on the show. And Tom, thank you for being my co-host. Valuable insights from you as well, like always.
Melissa, thank you very much for having me on, and Tom, thank you as well.
If you'd like to learn more about today's show, please see the links in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to or watch your podcast, because you don't want to miss an episode.